Hello, this is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and the project I am sharing today is what I have dubbed the Tarnished Metal Valentine, because I'm using the Tim Holtz faux metal technique with distress paint to create this funky background, but with a lot of cool Tim Holtz stuff. The result often is kind of antique-y and vintagey. And while that is really, really cool, it's not totally me. So I wanted to see if I could, I don't know, like contemporize it or make it a little more modern looking and just kind of weird. So I decided to create this background using distress paint and 3 different colors in sort of valentine-y shades. So I'm using Victorian Velvet, which is the lightest one. Then this very pink one is Picked Raspberry. And then the last one is Fired Brick, which is more of a red. And I am just smushing this onto this piece of 100-pound cardstock, in kind of a random manner to create sort of a blotchy surface. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm not trying to do anything specific. I'm just trying to get these 3 colors blended in kind of a random fashion on this surface. Now I do wind up with a lot of dark color that kind of obscures a lot of that lighter Victorian velvet. So I do go back and fix that once I have dried this piece. But you can kind of see, like, this is going to be the base layer for our metallic look. And I don't know of any pink or red metal per se. So this is kind of a, I don't know, fantasy metal, if you will. So that's kind of the background that I thought was pretty good. And I grab my heat gun and I just dry it off. And that's when I decided it's a little too dark. So I went back with some more Victorian Velvet and blotted a little more on here and there to just get a little more contrast between the light and the dark and the pinks and the reds. So I dry that off, and it has to be completely dry before you move to this portion. So what you need for this is a metallic distress paint, a sprayer with water. Your piece has to be entirely dry, as I mentioned. You'll need paper towels, something to dry it with. So like I have an embossing gun. You could also use the Ranger heat tool. And if you're not going to use the dauber on the metallic paint, then you need something to apply the paint with. So I don't do so well with the daubers. I tend to over squeeze and then the whole thing goes everywhere. So I decided to just take it off and I'm going to just apply it willy-nilly with a sponge brush. So you need a somewhat thick layer of this paint, and you're going to just spread it all over your colored surface. So the paint will dry fairly quickly, so that's why you have to do this fairly fast. This is real time that you're seeing this in, and you don't need to worry about like how smooth or even this is, because immediately you're going to start spraying it with water. Now you don't want to spray it in like an even mist. You want to get a purposely uneven layer of water on this. So I'm like squeezing the distress sprayer halfway to get like larger droplets of water. And I'm even trying to create pools of water in certain areas, because you want a fair amount of water. You don't want to soak it, but you want a decent amount. And once you get kind of how you like it, where it's fairly like random and uneven all over, you start to dry it. But you have to keep a really close eye on the metallic paint, because as soon as it starts to turn matte, that's when you have to blot it off with your paper towel. You do not want the whole thing to dry, just certain areas. And as soon as you see that dry and it turns matte, do this. You blot it with your paper towel, and you can see the wet paint sticks through, and then you peel back the paper towel and it pulls off some of the metallic paint. And now I'm dabbing at some of the wetter areas with the paper towel to pull off some more paint in certain sections. This doesn't always work. Like if you go to an area that is a little too dry, sometimes the paper towel will stick a little bit, but that doesn't really show, and it's not that big a deal. I did have that happen a little bit here and there. But you can see it creates this really funky aged metal kind of look. Now, granted, I've got a weird colored background, but like Tim Holtz often does this with the bronze paint over like a greeny blue background, and then it really looks like rusted, like copper, with the patina. So pretty cool. So it is totally dried now, and now I'm going to add some distress ink to this, which just add a little bit of depth to this. Now, I was not, again, going for realism. I'm kind of just going for strange, random fantasy metal here. So I'm using aged mahogany, which is a pretty red-brown. And I'm just blending this on very haphazardly and very randomly. And then I'm going to go to Dusty Concord, which is a purple, because I was still in my Valentine's mode. And I'm just, again, blotting this on here and there. I'm not trying to be like get a smooth blend or do anything too precise. I'm just kind of randomly adding color here and there. And I did not want to obscure all of the paint by any stretch. This is just kind of adding a little bit of depth around some of those metally areas to kind of add some color and interest. And then if you wipe it down, if you kind of buff it off, it will come off most of the paint. It doesn't really stick too much. And then I used black soot to add just a little more darkness. I didn't want it to be too dark, but I did like sort of the contrast of the black, and it felt, I don't know, a little more contemporary or something to me to add like the black in there as opposed to those browns. I wound up not using any browns other than the aged mahogany, which is really kind of more of a red. And that's the finish that you get, and it is pretty cool. So I knew I wanted to use the Simon Says Stamp Heart of Flowers dye for this, which is a pretty contemporary looking flower dye. So I cut that out of the middle, and now I'm trying to decide what color to back it in. So I grabbed neutrals because I was kind of going for masculine to gender neutral. And this tan looked kind of nice but feminine. The brown definitely looks very masculine to me. And not bad, but almost like too masculine. The gray was somewhere in between those two, like kind of gender neutral, but kind of blah. Like I just didn't think there was enough contrast between those two. I really liked the white. I thought the white was awesome, and it was super contemporary, but also kind of neutral. The black is also pretty contemporary, but like too harsh. Very masculine, but almost too much so. Like I thought it was just too harsh against that background. Like the brown, I think, would be the better option if you're going super masculine. But I did wind up going for the white background, and then I decided to matte the entire piece in black to give it like a black border all the way around. So I wasn't consciously trying to go for like masculine. I was trying to go for sort of clean and sort of a simple Valentine card. And I think I did wind up with something sort of gender neutral. So that worked out well. I did stamp this I love you greeting from my recent favorite sentiment set, which is Elizabeth Craft Design's General Sentiments. I stamped this in the Archival Distress palette. I used the black soot. It didn't stamp real well because that stamp's pretty new, so I did wind up going over that with a Copic liner just to kind of even it out. To adhere down this heart, since I didn't put stick-it on the back or anything, I used my glue pen in the center to just sort of dot glue all around those cutout areas, and then I have double stick tape around the outer edges, and then I'm just going to adhere it down to this white panel, and I do put an acrylic block on top of it to let it dry. Once it was dry, I decided I wanted to add a little bit of ribbon for just a tiny extra touch to the front, so I grabbed some black and white striped ribbon, and I'm just taping it to the back. And now I'm going to take a second piece and tie a knot around on the front. So that's like the cheater method for making a good knot on the front of your card. And so I'm going to trim off this ribbon a little bit, and then I'm going to take a micro glue dot, and this is the thing I almost always do with any kind of ribbon on cards. I'm going to bunch it up and take my scissors and just stick it behind the knot to adhere it in place on the front. And then I'm just take my HG gun and stick that on the back, and then adhere the entire thing to this black panel. And at this point I thought, oh, it looks pretty good, but it's missing something, like it needs a little more black or something. So I grabbed my black glaze pen, and I decided I would add black centers to all those flowers that are die cut out of the heart. So that is what I did. And that seemed to be just the right little extra black element to finish off the card. So once the black glaze pen was dry, I did adhere the entire thing to a side folding A2 sized white card base. And that is the completed project. So as I mentioned, I was trying to go for kind of a, I don't know, funky, more contemporary take on this kind of faux metal technique. And I like the way it came out. I think it's sort of gender neutral. It's sort of clean line, but also really funky and kind of cool. So I hope I've given you a little inspiration for maybe a way to try that faux metal technique and possibly a way to make it a little more contemporary. So if you liked the video, I'd love it if you give me a thumbs up. I, of course, love it if you subscribe to my channel. And here are a couple more videos I've done using various distress products. The first one is my take on the Northern Lights technique with distress inks. And the second one is something I did with distress crackle paint. So thanks so much and have a great day.